Get
Welcome back, everybody, to the 2 by 2 podcast. Today's conversation is one I'm really excited to have because so many of the consultants and founders and entrepreneurs and executives that listen to us are also deeply, deeply invested parents and often high achievers who are trying to look for that, cultivate achievement in their children. There are some questions I think, though, that we have to ask ourselves. Is that the right thing to do for this individual child? Do you know when your children really are thriving? Do you know when they're actually struggling? And do you really know the core things you should be paying attention to see if there is a problem or if something is just a normal part of development? And so to help us answer these questions today, we're going to do something a little bit different. Normally, the guests on the pod are people like us with our business background, a lot of entrepreneurs. But today, that is not the case. Today, I am joined by Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge. Dr. Roseann is a therapist and the author of an upcoming book. She is an expert in helping manage the nervous system dysregulation in your children. I personally, Dr. Roseann, so thank you for joining today. I'm super excited. I've been a fan of your work and leveraging some of your tips with our son. Also managed using some of your tips on yours truly, because as in any conversation, the conversation in parent and child is a two-way street where both have responsibilities. And I truly believe that. I think why I wanted to bring this conversation to this audience, because amongst the kind of high achiever career folks out there that listen to us, we often have a hard time managing our own nervous systems. We live in a world of high stress, and we have done that for years and years and years. And I think some of the tips that you bring are really useful to us in helping manage ourselves and then obviously managing those who we care about the most, which are our children. So thank you so much for joining today.
Well, it makes my heart happy to know that you're using this and it's helping.
Yeah.
And I am an entrepreneur, and I'm actually a second generation entrepreneur.
All right.
Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Nine LLCs. I'm sure people are like, I've got 12.
No, 9 is like, yeah. Okay, so let's start there then. Tell us about your entrepreneurial life, and then we'll get into the nervous system.
Well, I mean, I'm on this mission to stop this dysregulation crisis. So, everything I do minus real estate is because every Italian girl's got to own property. So, and I am first generation American. My parents are actually from Italy. You don't meet people that are quote unquote younger, usually like 70 and up, and you're first generation. But my parents, taught me all about being an entrepreneur, from collecting rents for properties to owning the world's largest transformer company. And so I didn't want to have a business, but then I was really good at what I was doing, which was neuropsych testing. And the teachers started asking me to test their own kids. And so there we go. And then once I see a problem, I am such a curious provider. And I also believe that, when it comes to dysregulation, whether it's an adult or a kid, everybody can get better. Right. And we often limit ourselves. And the way our mental health system is set up is to limit people. We tell you only have talk therapy and medication. And that's just baloney and cheese, and then people do those things and they don't feel better and they give up. So as you know, Lauren, listening to me, what I do and what my book is about, my podcast, everything I do is about how can we do things simply that you can integrate into your life? Because if you don't regulate your nervous system, nothing sticks.
No, that's very true. Okay, so can we start by saying what a regulated nervous system is? Like, let's imagine we're talking to people who are like, what they were like, give me the goods on how to grow my business. And we're like, today we're going to talk about breath work.
Yeah.
So let's start with
I think regulating your nervous system will grow your business. You will not believe what will happen to your creativity.
150%. Actually, let's talk about that later, and I will share you some.
Let's talk all about that, because I bring this to my entrepreneur friends and whatnot. So first of all, everyone's hearing about the nervous system. They're all hearing about dysregulation. I've been doing this for 3 decades. I'm so glad the conversation is there, and it's there because you said it, Lauren, they're at max capacity stress, right? So dysregulation is basically the body or brain's unhealthy response to stress, because we have all kinds of stressors. And don't think this is stress like I have a deadline or, I'm physically ill. This is everyday life. I talk about stress as a cup. And so we have a stress cup, and all day things fill our cup. But what we're supposed to be doing, what Dr. Roseann does, is all day she takes a little out. right? That doesn't mean even though I try to get a massage tonight, my massage therapist, Laura, is out tonight. I was like, "How dare you not be there?" Just kidding. But what am I doing during the day to remove some of that stress? Otherwise, it accumulates. And so, what is a regulated nervous system? A regulated nervous system isn't that you don't ever get stressed. It's that you don't a full stress cup overflows. So you might feel physically ill or your brain might, get stuck or you might yell at your colleague or your partner or your kid. There's some type of negative outcome from being at maximum capacity. That's what dysregulation is. Or those are the overstimulated symptoms. Or you see understimulation. You see problems processing, a lot of huh and was, or your working memory or your focus issues. I mean, I genuinely believe that we have a lot of ADHD now when people didn't meet those clinical criteria because they really didn't show the signs. Not, we're not talking people that were not identified or masking because we're so stressed out. The frontal lobes go offline. That's your job manager who organizes and working memory gets you through a grocery store without buying the wrong things, planning for projects. Your frontal lobes go offline when you are in a stress state. And
Mhm.
so regulation is you can manage stress. It doesn't mean you're avoiding it, but it doesn't collapse you behaviorally, emotionally, physically.
Can you talk a bit about what are some of the actual physical, not symptoms, but what is the physical, what's happening in your body physically when you feel stress? And what is the connection between your brain and those other physical symptoms that you perceive that we wouldn't normally perceive to be as part of your brain, like breathing, heart rate, heat, etc.?
And stress shows up differently for everyone, right? When I get super stressed, I actually get physically ill, Lauren. I will
Mhm.
get a cold or I will just not feel right. So I'm not an anxious person. I'm not a moody person. You have to be downright disrespectful to make me angry and then watch out 'cause I'm a New York Italian. So just get out of my way. I want to say that. So for some people, I talk about things as internalizers and externalizers, but also signs of those over and under stimulation because they overlap. For some people, it shows up as worry. Did I check that? Let me go back. Or I don't think that conversation went well. I don't think I'm going to get that contract. And you stress on it and that way. Other people might have that feeling in the pit of their stomach where they feel sick or they might have constipation or loose stools. Like those are the kinds of extremes. And certainly stress often shows up at 3 a.m., when in the middle of the night, sometimes getting to sleep, staying asleep. Entrepreneurs, we like to shortchange sleep because we think we're like 25.
Mhm.
Men and women hormones are a factor. So there are many ways that it shows up. What most people do, unfortunately, is they ignore the signs and then it sort of snowballs into other things, right? And just know that if you keep shortcutting your nervous system, it's gonna show up. You're gonna just whack-a-mole. It's gonna be one
Mhm.
thing or another. And some people have signs of all of these things, right? And so you talked about some of the physiological things, right, that are both indicators, right? Your heart rate variability or your blood pressure or, how much you're sleeping or sweating. But these are also things that we can use to help regulate our nervous system, right? The better we sleep, the better we eat.
Mhm.
These are things that actually are quick wins. People think they're long-term wins. Yes, over time they help us more and more, but man, you get a good night of sleep, you feel like a different human
Yeah.
being.
It's the difference in consulting speak. We call it a positive loop or a doom loop. And if you control or don't control some of these, let's call it the controllable factors, like you get the doom loop and the doom loop spins and spins and spins and
Yeah.
spins. But once you start correcting, you get the positive loop, which can help you, keep things under control.
And Lauren, you're gonna be just way more physiologically gonna go to a doom loop if your nervous system isn't in that nice, relaxed, what we call parasympathetic state, right? We have a stress response it's called autonomic nervous system, ANS. So relaxed is parasympathetic, stressed is sympathetic. We are supposed to go to a sympathetic when you almost get run over crossing the street or you thought you sold your business and in the final hour they said no, right? Your nervous system is supposed to be like, "Holy cow." But what's
Mhm. It's
happening
a
is
survival mechanism, right? Like when you feel the threat, you should be primed to respond and respond swiftly and strongly.
that's
But
right.
it's not, the problem is when you don't respond to something that's not a threat. right?
Yeah.
Those are realistic. So,
Right. And the more we put in our stress cup without taking out, right? We have to have capacity. Our nervous system doesn't have unlimited capacity. And then for us as entrepreneurs, right? I say my parents were like these amazing role models, but they also were Italian immigrants who didn't know. My dad worked 6 days a week until he was 82, until he sold his company,
Jesus.
right? So it's a gift and a curse. Mhm.
Yeah.
But my nervous system gave me clues, and you can't ignore them. And so, if you're really not feeling well, right, then you kind of can't ignore that. But a lot of us as founders push through. And what kind
Push
of
through
example is that
for
for our
20
kids?
years. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked about us. What are some of the signs that you would look for in your children?
Yeah. So I want you to rethink your kids' behavior as clues, right? So when we step back, right, I have a protocol called CALS, CALS, and the A is avoiding personalizing. Because, when we parent, first of all, parenting is never like anything what we thought it was going to be, right, Lauren?
No, never. Actually, I had this conversation. I went to my 25th college reunion 2 weeks ago, and we had a girls' lunch of the six of us who were close. And the consensus was the most difficult part about parenting is parenting a child who is not like you. And that many children, and if you're sitting around a table of high achievers and most of them have 3 children, everyone's going to have a kid that's not like them, right? And that's not a bad thing, right? You love them. They are amazing at the things that they are amazing at. But it's hard to know what even to recognize what patterns and traits and behaviors and responses when they are not something that you have personally experienced.
Yeah. I mean, over the years, parents would be like, this kid has to listen to music when he's studying. What is this, Dr. Rowe? My answer is a hard no. And I would say, wait, let's talk to your kid. And the kid would be like, well, I can focus a lot better when there's music. And I'm like, well, what's the data? The grades substantiating that? Yeah. So let's back off. Instead of them fighting over it, it's really hard to parent kids that are different from you. And I think, parenting is just so many joys and challenges for sure. And the more we are in overdrive, our nervous system is at max capacity, the less we have to give our kids in those moments of like, oh my God, I got to talk to this kid about
Mhm.
whatever. I had to talk to my kid about his study style yesterday because he came back from his honors engineering class and he goes, that teacher doesn't know teach. And I said, oh, I already knew the answer. I said, what makes you say that? And he goes, well, she doesn't teach us everything that's on the test. And I said, honey, this is ninth grade honors. You have to read everything just because she didn't tell you. And he's like, yeah, but still, she's not a good teacher. I don't disagree with him in some regards, but this is the world of hard knocks. Like you're not getting spoon fed like at your Montessori school, buddy. You know?
Yeah. 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 So what are we like? So observe it. So go through comms.
Yes.
What was the A?
So let's think about the behaviors, right? So if your kid, like at any age, right? So I like to think about, people always ask me, what age is this for? Is my kid have ADHD? That's irrelevant to a point. Just know that the younger a kid is, or if they're neurodivergent or have other issues, I don't want to, like clinical mental health issues, you're going to see more of these behaviors and the intensity, frequency, and duration will be bigger and they'll need more reinforcement. So if we avoid personalizing behavior, we can actually be a detective and see behaviors. Right. So that's important, right? Because if we're activated, we're going to see it through not so good lenses. These won't be rose colored lenses. These will
Mhm.
be like annoying. So, what are you seeing? Is your kid, always irritated the moment they get home from school? Is every conversation friction? Do they only see comfort from their devices, right? So, what are those behaviors that you're seeing? And again, all kids are prone to dysregulation. I didn't say that. Every kid dysregulates. When we start to worry about our kids' behavior is when they dysregulate with intensity, frequency, and for a long time. That is when you know you have a problem. And you can't always see that if you're not, and I'm not saying you have to be perfectly regulated, but like 80% regulated so that you can not personalize their behavior and see it. But kids will show signs of having focus problems, rage, all these other things. And if it's a one off or it happens around a short amount of time, you certainly want to be there to support them. But if it's going on for a long time, you've got to you've got a kid who's struggling with dysregulation and you need to do something about it.
Yeah. So you're looking for duration of time as well as change, like if, perhaps if they weren't before and now
Yes.
they are, but they
Yeah.
remain that way.
Yeah. And anytime there's a sudden onset of a big behavior, I'm worried,
Okay.
right? Because behaviors with kids don't come on suddenly. They creep in. So if there's a sudden behavior, what am I always going to worry about? Is there any level of victimization of any kind, some kind of trauma? Is there bullying? Something is hard for them, or maybe there's a physical problem. So we don't ever want to ignore that. And we wanna, because kids don't change overnight. They really don't unless something is clinically
How
driving it.
how does this differ? Does this differ if a child is 3 years old versus 6 years old versus 12-year-old? I mean, you think about like a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old, and the brain cycles are change. There's such change happening with them so
Yeah.
quickly. Whereas I can tell you, in an 8-year-old, that level of change is not as, it certainly still happens. We see phases, but it's not like it was when he was little. What are the differences at different ages that a parent should be
So,
concerned about?
everybody's prone to big emotions, even 57-year-olds, right? You know, and you're so right. Little kids feel things, right? And they don't know what they're feeling. That's their response. So as kids get older, you see less of that. But if you have a kid who's still prone to that, and let's say they're 17 or they're 21, you have a developmental lag at a minimum. And could it be neurodivergence or a mental health issue? Of course. But when kids are little and at every age, every stage, they experience big emotions. Hopefully, you're a trusted resource for them. You help them problem solve for it, develop a coping skill for it, not avoid it. This is one of the greatest mental health problems we have in America and moving to the world, is that we're teaching our kids to be stress averse and avoiding stress. That is not what we want to do here. We certainly want to regulate so we can problem solve. If your kid isn't getting it and you try over and over, just like if your kid was learning to ride a bike, right? You're like, okay, that's not working. Let me do it like this. Let me try that. They learn. But that really is the issue, is that the learning is just very delayed or it's not happening at all. You really have to figure out why that's happening.
What would be, so biggest problem is avoidance. What would be an example of teaching your kid that it's okay to avoid versus an example of I guess encountering but
Yeah.
not avoiding? Like, what does that look like in real life?
Yeah, so anxious avoidance is a real thing, and adults found I hang out with a ton of founders and so you have to say, why am I avoiding this? Am I avoiding something that I can do that's actually hard, but I can do it? That's different from I'm avoiding, like, of course I'm an extrovert. I don't think, and that's a surprise to anybody, but I hang out with a lot of introverts. A lot of entrepreneurs are introverts, and so they'll rely on me to bridge the social gap. And then the moment things get too much for them, they avoid, right? Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. These are successful people. They know their limits. So when you talk about avoiding, are we avoiding something that they're perfectly capable of, or maybe they have to stretch themselves 10%? Because really smart kids don't like to stretch themselves. That's a real reality
Mm,
with very
really?
bright kids. Yeah, I'm talking like gifted kids. They don't like anything hard. They are so used to things coming very naturally for them that
Hmm.
when things are a little hard, oh, they hate it.
What happens to them? So what do you? I'm thinking about all the children and myself. What do you mean? Do they
Yeah,
like just they don't know how to deal with it
they
because they
don't know how
haven't
to
had
deal with
to?
it. They don't like that feeling of having to, these are kids like, and I know everyone thinks their kid is gifted, right? I'm telling you they're not. We're talking the 98 to 99 percentile IQ kids. We're talking real high IQ kids here, right? And actually the most high achieving individuals tend to have about a high average IQ because they feel comfortable pushing themselves.
They have to push.
They have to push. So they know no limits of what they can do. They're like, "Oh, I don't mind working." So, I've had the pleasure of helping so many, like, kids with like a 99.9999 IQ. And so what would happen is they would be like, I don't like this writing. I don't like this, whatever it was. Writing was one of the big ones, right? That we would get there and they're like, I already know this. Why do I have to write it down? Because you have to slow down and you have to learn a process and you have to show your knowledge in it in a format. Or let's say they were told they had to do an instrument and they have like no interest in that. I mean, that was just like you could offer them $1 million and they were like, no. And that sense that I'm not good at something is foreign to them, and it feels really
Mm.
uncomfortable, so it could create a lot of anxiety, big emotional reactions, and that's just what you see. So avoidance, what's normal? I'm avoiding something because, you know what? I don't really like this. I don't need to do this, or I don't like this group of kids, or, this isn't important to me. That's normal. Talk about it. But a lot of people avoid things because they're uncomfortable, and honestly, it limits them. It limits their growth, and I hear that I heard that time and time again over 3 decades because I would regulate their nervous systems, and the parents were like, "She's not resistant to anything now. She's willing to jump off the literally the diving board," or, those kinds of things, and they were so excited because they saw that potential, but they kept this was a no kid,
Yeah.
because I don't like feeling uncomfortable.
This makes a lot of sense, actually, if you think about the idea that if you are constantly having to work hard at something, that's just what you do. That becomes a habit. But where you don't need to, then that go back to this idea of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. That's going to be a spike for you. Whereas before, that's not. The spikes start to dull because, yeah, I know how to do this. It's not as stressful.
Yeah.
I have my structure, or I know that I keep pushing, and I know what's going to happen with the outcome.
Yeah. And
Um,
we all have our little quirks, like I can't parallel park, Lauren. It's never going to happen. I'm in my 50s and I've
you
been
can't
managed.
parallel park.
I cannot parallel park. I cannot parallel park. And when I got my driver's license, my mother was like, "Oh, she's gonna fail, right?" So they don't even have you parallel park anymore. So there was no cars and I was able to drive right in and I got my driver's license. So I have this weird disconnect between a visual spatial processing. But the moment if you told me I had to do that or I'm going to literally going to speak in front of 1,000 people, people are like, "Oh my gosh, are you so nervous by that?" And I was like, "No, I love that. I'm so excited."
Yeah.
But if you told me I had a parallel park today, I'd start sweating.
It's hilarious.
I'd go right into sympathetic dominance, that's for sure.
That's funny. I'm an excellent parallel parker. I
See?
had to do I lived in a town with only parallel parking, so, like, I can still kinda do it with my eyes closed. It's just one of those things.
Yeah. Isn't that
Yeah.
funny? But, and I also, like, I'm just that type of person where I'm really comfortable not being perfect, And I think that's another big part of this is that a lot of intelligent people, a lot of creatives, like, they don't wanna do something. I mean, I hang out with a lot of people that are afraid to show their work unless it's perfect, and that's really awful. That's an
Okay, so let's
awful
talk about this
thing.
trait in the family. This is interesting.
Yeah.
If you think about really high achieving parents
Yes.
that would exhibit this trait, how does that manifest itself in the family dynamic? Does it get passed to the kids? What if the kid either is or is not also high achieving? Do they just pick that up as a trait? How does this start to cycle through generations?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about something called generational emotional wealth. I'm actually doing a TED Talk on it. And it's this idea that we need to pass down nervous systems, not stress. And we are passing down
We
stress.
are passing down nervous systems. Let's just be clear.
Yeah.
Like, that is
I mean,
100% happening.
I married into, like, a really fun family, and they're so funny, Lauren, like, and it's so great. And not that I'm not fun, but, like, my husband is, like, 10x more fun than me, and I see it. I see it with the grandpa, I see it with the uncles, I see it with my boys, like, so we're choosing to pass that down, and it's good to be fun because it helps break stress too, like, we use it all the time, we're very sarcastic. But, like, when you think about even culturally, right? So there are certain cultures that expect and demand academic excellence, right? It's just a part of where it is. And so you start expecting and demanding, you also are showing your kids that. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't demand academic excellence. What we aren't showing is that we have to have balance. We're revving and revving and revving, and everyone is, what do you ask most founders? They say, like, I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
And, and so we're not changing things so that we can show our kids that as well.
Can we
And
Sorry, Dr. Roseann, can
yeah,
we myth bust the idea of not having enough time in the context of a nervous system?
yeah. Yeah.
I feel like this is a learning that I have had in the last 2 years. Okay, so I'm 47, 45 to 47. I used to cut I don't have enough time to clean. I don't
Yeah.
have enough time to cook a healthy dinner. I don't have enough time to blah, 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 blah. I am gonna now officially call bullshit on all of that. It is a trait I also see in other founders. It's a trait I see in gifted children, maybe not
Yep.
top. I don't think my my kids or my stepkids are like top 2% geniuses here, but they're probably all top quartile. I don't have enough time for this. I don't think that's true at all. I think it's the choice of where you choose to spend your time
Yep.
and how you're working within the time you have. So, agree or
I
disagree?
completely agree. And, part of what my work is and all the things I talk about is that what we need, right? This stress cup, right? So I joked that it is true. I did try to get a massage tonight. So I do big things all the time, right? So I use a PEMF device, which regulates your nervous system, makes your cells work better, reduces
Okay, let's go through this
inflammation.
slow because
Oh, oh,
this is where I woo woo love this shit. Okay,
okay.
so
Oh, I'm so glad. So I use
number
all this
one,
technology to regulate my nervous system. I do. But then I also take a magnesium bath almost every night, or I go in a saltwater hot tub. And I do big things. But what I actually do and what I'm really trying to teach adults and kids is that you just like depositing coins in your bank, it's the coins that matter and build up over time. So, what are you doing in the little parts that actually help you all day? Because we can't get a massage every day. We can't do all that. I mean, I know people have unlimited funds and they still can't do that,
you
right?
may not have the PEMF mat at your office, although
Yeah.
I do, by the
Yeah.
way.
Right. Yeah.
We should talk about this. I got to tell you, I don't know if I told you about the place where I work now, the co-working space. It's freaking amazing. They have this lab that has like all of these things. It's groundbreaking.
That's
But anyway,
awesome. So, I actually created my own FDA approved device that's a one you put in your pocket
oh
because
wow.
I had the mat and I didn't have time for it.
Yeah, because you
So,
have to sit there.
sit there. So I have my little device, you pop it in your pocket, and you'll see me wearing it all the time. People ask me, like, what is that thing I see in your pocket? Because they realize it's not a phone. But I'm not even saying that. What needs to happen is you need to, I sort of have an a la carte menu in my book and all the things. You can listen to my podcast, right? So you have to decide what are you doing. So for me and for most people, the quickest thing you can do is actually called diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing. And what it's going to do, it's the quickest way to get you into a parasympathetic state in seconds. It doesn't matter how stressed you are. Now, some people don't like that. So I have other techniques, but let's just stick with the breath first of all. So, breath and anything you do are only going to work if you do it multiple times and you repeat it throughout the day. We're talking minutes. We're not talking hours, and we're really talking about investing at least 10 minutes a day. Everybody has 10 minutes a day because
And 10
exactly what
minutes
you said.
spread across a day.
Spread across the day. Yeah,
You got 2 minutes,
you got it.
5 times a
So
day.
I have people set up their phones and I have them set it up for 3 times as a reminder. Okay. Some people check in their emails 3 times a day. Fine. Then before you go and check your email, go and do this. And I like a very simple breath. It's called a 4-7-8. So you're breathing in for four. And just to be clear, when you're breathing in, you're going to fill up your belly. You're not sucking in. Most people suck in. That is not a proper breath to pull you in a sympathetic state. So in for 4 seconds, you're holding for 7 or any amount that you could do that's over 4 seconds. And then you're always going to exhale for at least 1 second longer than you held. So it's hold in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. And you do that 3 times. That's the minimum. And then you move on. And so then you're pulling a little of that stress out of your cup. And the way the nervous system works is that the more it regulates, the more it will regulate. The more it's in a sympathetic stress state, the more it's going to go there. So this is how some of these people, like, you look at like probably one of my favorite entrepreneurs is Richard Branson. He's a dyslexic. He's always like, let's do this and let's do that. And just such creativity. And he does a lot to take things out of his stress cup in multiple ways, right? And I know people will be like, well, he's super high level. Okay. But you have to do these things, right? And if breath isn't for you, My other favorite thing is a heart hug. You put your hand on your heart, and then you take your other hand and you put it on your right shoulder. And ideally, you have your feet on the floor and you press down. And it's a somatic safety signaler. And I even do this with my feet not on the ground in my bed before I get out of bed in the morning and when I go to sleep. And it just, again, it's going to bring you right down. And there are a variety of other things. Reading for 10 minutes is a book, not a Kindle. A non-device book is actually regulating your nervous system. Prayer regulates your nervous system.
Yeah,
You
prayer is
know?
simple, another form of meditation. I would argue reading probably, I mean, does reading work for the same reason?
Yes, yes. And
It's just
you're
a mental
the
dialogue.
mental, you're getting out of your head, right? You're practicing one thing. It's a calming activity. And reading a regular book does really help increase your focus.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-AI, love AI, but we are seeing like early signs of people, some research that there's, a decline in our brains and our cognitive abilities
I've
with
seen this.
overuse of AI.
I've read that research about the lag in your cognitive ability that happens
Yeah.
even after you leave the AI and
Yes.
you're when they're back in the real world,
Yeah.
for your ability to recall what you just produced with AI is
Yeah.
far different than
Yeah.
if you produced it itself. It's actually some of the things I'm thinking about for our team because like for a consultant, AI, especially where we are with it now, it's like such a great tool to help us speed up our thought processes. I'm not saying copy it. I'm saying
Yeah.
to spar with it as a thought partner and to take off some of the PowerPoint generation, stupid stuff. But the problem is it's not my work. If let's say I get it from my team and I see what they're coming back to me, I think you never would have given that to me before
Never,
because
never.
because as you were going through that process, your brain didn't have to go through those macerations of like the cycles of iteration, the rapid cycles of iteration that happen. It doesn't happen. It
No.
like,
A good way to counter that, by the way, is actually to write. I have, like, for those of you listening, I carry a notebook, and I actually take notes, like
I've
real
started doing that
notes.
again.
Yeah, it's really helpful. Or another great way, because I do this with all my neurodivergent people, is I use mind maps for everything. So,
Mm.
a circle in the middle with little bubbles, just to give your brain that reorganization, the visual orientation of how everything is connected, but also when you are writing, you're activating your your kinesthetic systems. And it's just another way, it's a stimulation for your brain. And, we're not talking rewriting the whole thing. We're talking about simplifying, but writing is important.
Yeah, I've gone back to my picture drawing in my book. I'm super visual, so I do the same thing now with my
Yeah.
team because I'm like, I can't
Yeah.
remember. I honestly can't remember it unless I'm doing that. So we're going back to basics.
Back to
Okay, so
basics.
speaking of back to basics, going back
Yeah.
to these tactics that we can use, how do you use them? Are there special ways you use them with your children? Are there some tricks you have for younger children that might help them adopt these? Like, when do you pull this trigger? How do we do it with our kids?
First of all, younger kids are the easiest. I remember my editor, AJ Harper, came over and she goes, "Oh, your kids are on the Chris and Roseanne plan." That's my husband. Like, they just integrate it in who they are kind of thing. So it's never too late if you're of a failure to launch kid and they're in their 20s and they're still at home and they struggle. It is never too late. So the first thing you have to do is you have to do this for yourself. You cannot ask somebody else to do something you're unwilling to do yourself. And so at a really simple level, you're going to take these, practices and you're going to start. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to create opportunities, not when your kid is activated, please, but in
Mm,
moments of calm. And if you say to me, because people will say to me, my kid's so dysregulated, so unfocused, so resistant, so angry, whatever, that there's hardly a moment of that. We'll do it in the valley of it, right? Maybe they don't need to be perfectly regulated, and try to make it something enjoyable. Like, let's go for a walk outside for 10 minutes, or, let's prayer can be, poetry. It can be all different things. So, what are you doing, and are you making it a routine? And don't expect you're going to do this for 2 days and a miracle is going to happen.
yeah.
That's a real problem we have in this country, especially us fast thinkers, like boom, bam, boom, I need this yesterday. You do it for at least 7 days and really 30 days. And,
Yeah, 30 days.
30 days, but 7 days, you're gonna see changes in that intensity, frequency, and duration. So
Mhm.
maybe their difficulty with focus or their anger, is still there, but you're like, wow, I feel like it's like 25%. Okay, well, that's a lot better than we were. Look at where we can go. So be persistent, continue it, and look for the change.
Let's imagine the scenario where you have a really challenging 15-year-old. So you can look for those valleys. Any tip, I mean, you can imagine 8-year-old, you can bring them along, even a 12-year-old, you can bring them along. And I
Yeah.
actually think an older child is easier to bring along,
I
but
do think an
14 and
older kid is
15
easier.
are special. So any tips you have for like that particular like teen challenge?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I'm not telling you to be funny if you're not funny, because but I do think humor is the greatest diffuser. Like when I see when, my older son and now, he's 21 and when he went through, his teens and now I have a 15-year-old, I call it the Bruce Banner to the Hulk, right? You start to see Bruce Banner kind of changing. We would bring in some fun, like, could you do anything with your kid that would be kinesthetic? Would they do Legos with you? Would they do some art? Would they cook with you? To me,
Hmm.
cooking is like the greatest grounder in the whole world. And it's
Yeah.
not like you better make dinner. Don't do it like that. Do it like, hey, I'm thinking of making chicken or I'm making steak. What do you want to have? And they might say, I don't know, and say, okay, well, I guess I'll make the chicken. Come, grab the onions and I'll meet you over here. You don't say, do you want to do this? And so there's something that happens, right? When you're cooking is like one of my all-time favorite things in the whole world because you are getting a sensory experience and then you're going to make something in a relatively short amount of time and that sense of accomplishment feels good.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a great suggestion. One last question on this, and then I want to go to some fast questions. How do you manage technology and I don't know if it's the removal of technology or the
Yeah.
moderation of technology from a kid who is used to technology and having the tablet as their dopamine or the phone.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that in this scenario?
Well, that's its own whole episode, Lauren, but I'll give you the quickest version of that. First of all, 36 states are banning it during the school day now.
Oh
So,
God, yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's happening, but parents think that's the answer. It's not the answer. So the number one greatest source of conflict is parents not setting boundaries. So what happens is, right, I grew up in the time of Atari, you probably grew up in Mario Brothers, right? And so we didn't do it all day long. Like it just wasn't a thing, right? So we are approaching it from our own upbringing. And these kids are in devices all day. They don't have textbooks anymore, this, that. And there's so much behind it that there's a dopamine hit, the way the dopamine's happening every 30 to 60 seconds. That's just not natural. So there's a very baked in addictive quality. So just understand that. Don't give up, but you need clear boundaries set in advance with warnings. I have a whole chapter on device dysregulation in my book. I don't think devices are the devil. I just think we're not communicating and don't have empty threats with your kids. Like people get real pissed at their kids. Get off that device or I'm going to send you to boarding school and all that. That's just a waste of time, people. And then they know it and it just creates a conflict. Clear boundaries, transition warnings, and I love technology that limits their usage, which the iPhone just this week
Really?
just came out with it because everybody was mad. I use the Verizon app, I use the Wi-Fi app. So now they're able to limit usage and more kids can go right on the iPhone.
I'm gonna do that for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but just don't get caught in the boundary trap and trying to set it once they're already jacked up on the dopamine. It just
Yeah,
doesn't work.
it doesn't work. I
Mm-mm.
think I've noticed too, like you mentioned that you're the Atari, I'm the Super Mario
Yeah.
Brothers. You and I both have habits and we know how to live in a world without phones. We know that when we can tell you, okay, I'll be here at 3. And if you're not there at 3, you don't panic until 3:10. Right? Like you can wait there. We know what's happened. We know that you can go to the school office and call the school office and say,
Yes.
hey, we can figure out how to get this to my kid. But people who are 10 years younger
Oh,
than they actually never had to do this. So they
mm-mm.
don't have some of these like very basic skills of like,
Yes.
how do I work in a world where I don't know how to plan general social interactions in advance? So to your point earlier about you must regulate yourself first, I feel like these basic skills are things that parents in their 30s need to refresh themselves on and the schools need to adopt, and there needs to be some like acceptance, especially like parent to parent. Hey, I'm going to pick them up at this time. Don't let them have their phones. And if I'm not there 15 minutes, you don't, this is the
Yeah.
norm. It's really interesting. That
Uh,
like hit me. I have a parent group of like really varied ages, and I'm at the top end. So I realized like they were saying this, and I was like, well, why don't you just call the office? And they had no idea. Like it was
no,
bonkers.
it's very, very true. And you know what I love about the younger people too, like depending on where you live in the country, like where I live, people don't get married and have kids absolutely until their mid-30s. Like
Mhm.
you're like, "What? You're getting married and you're only 30? Like, what? You still got time." Like it's so
Yeah.
funny. But like in Texas, if you don't have 3 kids by the time you're 27, people are like, "What's going
Particularly
on?"
in the suburbs, right? Like the kindergarten parents are in their 20s.
Yeah, but
They don't
but
know.
they you're right, and so wherever I am, last night I had a bunch of 20-year-olds who I went to a press event, and, it was a media mixer, and so I'm there as an expert, and all these people in their 20s, they're so open to nervous system regulation, like, they want it, so I love that, like, I love that they're open to it, but you're right, they don't understand, like, how do they're texting their kids, like, I talked to a grandparent today, and his grandkids text him during the school day,
You can't do that. Yeah, anyway,
but
it's wild to me.
yeah,
Let's do some
sure.
fast questions if you don't mind. Okay. So, what's one thing that every parent worries about that you think they should worry less about?
Think easily. It's that, they worry about, what they're gonna become in their grades. Like, they use grades as the benchmark of mental health. I'm telling you that is such a false benchmark. You need to worry way more about are they regulating their nervous system, and do they have coping skills?
Great. Conversely, what is one thing you think that parents should pay more attention to?
Yeah, are they managing stress and do they have problem solving skills, right? So, our kids will come to us when they have a problem, but if your kid does not know how to manage and you're their life preserver, your kid's going to have a lifetime of problems.
Yeah,
And
you're not always
I
there.
couldn't say that louder. Number one reason why kids leave college, 40% of college freshmen leave for a variety of reasons, but the number one reason is mental health.
Wow. Not surprising. Okay. Positive note. Let's go on our positive
Yeah.
loop. What's the most hopeful thing you're seeing in the children you work with today?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, kids are an open book. They are so willing to learn. Parents get so hung up on, oh, my kid's not going to do this. They will. So, the most positive thing that I'm seeing is that even though parents are stressed and overwhelmed, they're really they're understanding I've got to regulate myself and it's simple. And they're willing to do this together with their kids and kids want it. So kids will do what you set for them.
That's great. Finally, last question. You mentioned the younger parents are so much more open to this than perhaps older. But 20 years from now, what do you think the conversation will be?
Well, part of why I'm doing this is, to combat this dysregulation overwhelm crisis. I have a vision that people will prioritize regulating their nervous system and treating it in the same way that they brush their teeth. We brush our
Mhm.
teeth to avoid cavities. I want to see this be so normalized. Like, hey, I got to go over here and just like do a little Tai Chi, or I got to do my breath work for a few minutes and then I'm reset and just move on. So that's what I believe, because we have to move in that direction, because we're at a point where, I could go over startling statistics, but we already feel the crisis. It doesn't matter where you live in the world. We just happen to be Americans and we have more of everything.
As part of that vision, here's an idea. What if every PE, physical education, every gym class had a unit on nervous system regulation, just like they have? What if it was part of practicing these tactics was part of the presidential fitness test?
Yeah, why
What if we
not?
made it that important? Because it is. It's just as important
It's
as your
just as
ability to
important.
stretch or run or jump, right?
Yes. And I have a dream that my book will go home with every new parent, because we spend too much time thinking about the car seats. And then you get this kid and you're like, what about this? What about that? And wherever I go, Lauren, whether it's I'm with my entrepreneurs, or because I was just in Austin, an entrepreneur event, or I go to the media, everybody wants to talk to me about their kids' behavior. And is this normal or is that not normal? And you know what? So what? I got neurodivergent kids. Your kids may be neurodivergent or whatnot. It doesn't mean it's the absolute worst thing that's ever going to happen. But if we don't take the time to regulate ourselves or our children, you're just going to have a lot more physical mental health issues. And guess what? It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Like people will spend more time complaining about it. Start doing your breath work 3 times a day and message me on socials and tell me how you're doing
Yeah.
because it makes a
Breathe,
difference.
people. That's the
Breathe.
breathe and breathe with your children. There you go. It's that simple. Well, Dr. Roseann, this has been just a fantastic conversation. I really want to, again, like express my gratitude for you joining me. It's been just such a pleasure. Can you tell the listeners where to find you and your book, The Dysregulated Kid?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for this conversation because it's so fun. I always enjoy talking to you. So you can find me everywhere, Dr. Roseann, Drroseann, no E at the end. .com or on any socials, just find me there. And the dysregulated kid, just search the dysregulated kid. It will come up on every place you buy a book. And my podcast is Dysregulated Kids, which are
So
short episodes designed to give you information to help you right away because we don't got time for chit
no,
chat. We got to get action and start doing.
that's right. So we'll put all the links to that in the show notes, including the link to the book, which I think comes out in September. I have
does.
pre-ordered it. I'm excited to see it. Thanks again, Dr. Roseann. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.